the Cybrink podcast, and the video unfortunately had some technical difficulties, but it doesn't matter because right now Josiah Zayner is clear. We're communicating. We can hear each other on opposite sides of the West Coast. I'm in Boise, Idaho, and Josiah, you're where?
In San Francisco, California right now.
How in the world do you describe to other people what you do and how you do it? Do you just,
It's not easy because generally what I tell people is that I run a company that does consumer synthetic biology or consumer genetic design. And to most people, it's just like a completely foreign concept that it will require, hours of explanation, which I usually don't like to get into.
Now, let's start out with your credibility here, right? You said you were a PhD candidate, and we were talking on the right before we hit the record button. You're a PhD candidate, and then where did you go to school? What did you focus on? What was your emphasis?
Yes. So I did my PhD at the University of Chicago in biophysics. I worked on protein engineering and the thermodynamics of how protein molecules, these little like nano machines inside your cells, how they move and respond to the environment. Because, they don't have literal mechanical parts like a car or something like that. After that, I wrote this crazy grant to NASA. I said, hey, look, I'm going to engineer some proteins and bacteria that will be able to help astronauts on Mars and on the International Space Station. And they said, all right, sounds good. So they paid for me to work there. Unfortunately, NASA's kind of like everything everybody hates about the government. People don't come into work. People pay way too much money for stuff that nobody needs. And nothing ever gets done. You got to fill out like a million forms just to fill out forms. So I decided to leave and start my company, the Odin, which is this consumer synthetic biology company. We sell genetic engineering kits that people can use at home.
Where did the curiosity for all this begin?
I don't know. So I originally wasn't really into biology. I was more of a computer hacker type. So I grew up in the late 90s doing computer hacker stuff and was really into computers, wrote some computer programs, and worked for Motorola as a computer person, network engineer for a little while. So I think it just all came from, I'm really reductionist. I like to break things down to, as far as I can, and breaking things down to molecules and DNA is oh man, I'm stopping myself from swearing so much.
Yeah, just fucking go for it. How about that? I'll start it. You just go for it, man. If you worked at NASA and you engineered some proteins for them, fuck it, let's go for it, man. Just be you.
All right, I'll just be me. Computers were the frontier of the last age. Now we're moving into this genetic and biological age, right? The problem with computers is they were always inside the computer. It's inside the pipeline. Yeah, you could make robots and shit like that, but what happens if you can actually program and engineer matter, living matter in organisms? Now that shit is fucking crazy.
Yeah,
right?
You can't control it.
Just oh man, I want to engineer a flying dog or something. That's what people can. You can actually try to do that stuff, right? People get the knowledge and people start becoming genetically literate. The possibilities are endless. If you look at what exists in the world, right? And changing that stuff and manipulating it, it's crazy.
Well, there's a lot of crazy shit that's happening just recently, and it kind of seems like it's just lined up with your career. One such thing is CRISPR-Cas9 technology that kind of came out. Can you tell me how you found out about CRISPR and what your reaction was when you found out?
Yeah, no. So actually, it's funny because one of my friends who I went to graduate school with, Luciano Marafini, we used to play soccer together all the time. And he was working on CRISPR stuff. This was in like 2012 or 2011, and he published this paper, and like none of us really paid much attention to it. We are just like, whatever, that's fucking, science, normal, nothing exceptional. And then like a few years later, I started reading more about this stuff, and more people started publishing on it. I was like, holy shit, like, whoa, this stuff is crazy. This is like a cutting edge genetic engineering technology. And not only that, it's super simple. Like that's awesome. And it took me so long to just like dig in and figure out like, how can I make this accessible to people? Such a powerful technology deserves to be democratized, deserves to be put in the hands of the people. And how can I do that? So I spent, a bunch of time, nights and weekends, just toiling away, figuring out how I could make these CRISPR kits to send to people.
Well, and then now to get into the legality portion of it, but before we go there, I think in order for people to understand that, they need to first understand like what you can do with CRISPR, because CRISPR stands for what is it? Something repeating in sequence. That's about all I know.
It's the worst thing. It's the worst name ever, dude. Worst name ever. So CRISPR was actually discovered before it was used for genetic engineering, because it originally is not a genetic engineering technology. So what CRISPR actually does was it was a defense mechanism for bacteria to chop the DNA of viruses that enter the cell. Well, what scientists have learned, they've known for a long time, is that if you chop the DNA of the organism will try to repair that chop that you make. And what you can do is you can trick the organism into modifying their DNA after that cut's been made by supplying them with a new template to repair. So people figured out that they could use this CRISPR to chop the DNA of, the host organism instead of the virus. And then it became a genetic engineering technique. But yeah, it stands for clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats, which like makes no sense to the technology as it's currently used. But it's like the used name still.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is, and they didn't find out what you can do with it. And then just recently, there's just been companies that are, that are making, well, they're either blowing. I struggle to, I cringe at saying what companies are doing with CRISPR now because I don't know that much about it. Are you watching any companies right now that are like publicly traded or ones that are really leading the way? Are you cringing at some of them? Are you excited and pushing for some of the others? Like, where are you at with some companies that are really focusing on it?
The problem is that, like, because of regulations by the government, a lot of these companies and what they're actually trying to target and use CRISPR for, or even like the actual usefulness of CRISPR in general, has prevented, these major companies like Editas and Caribou and Intellia from doing anything like really serious, which is a complete shame. So you see a lot of people overseas in other countries that are pushing the advancement of CRISPR research beyond what we are experiencing here in the U.S. But CRISPR as a technology itself, I think there's a lot of hype behind it. I don't know how well it'll pan out, but it is a really awesome and amazing technology, and I think people deserve to know about it and be exposed to it and understand it.
CRISPR's biohacking, but the biohacking is kind of like the larger umbrella of sorts, and then you're a self-proclaimed biohacker. What are some other things that you're getting into that are exciting besides CRISPR and the biohacking community?
Yeah, so biohacking is just what I imagine like, the original term hacker, it meant something like somebody who does something clever, usually associated with programming or engineering. And I think the term is the same thing with biohacking, right? Somebody who's trying to do something clever or new with biology in some way. And I really try to push the boundaries and explore the shit that's possible. What I'm really trying to do is not only provide people with tools to genetically engineer organisms, but also with ways in which they can modify their own biology.
So let's take. I read on one of your websites. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been if you don't know now you know.com. Or it redirects from josiahzayner.com. But you had a couple of problems with your gut bacteria, and you did some self-experiments and biohacking with that. I myself as well went through 3 rounds of antibiotics, and it wiped out my gut bacteria. I think it's a more common issue than most people understand or know. What are some tips that someone that has some gut health issues, how can they biohack themselves to a better life?
I don't know if I encourage much of this stuff, but yeah, like, like I don't think people understand how like harmful antibiotics really are to your just like micro. So our body is just covered in bacteria. They're all over us. They're in our gut. They're everywhere. When you take antibiotics, generally they're not targeting one bacteria. They're targeting a lot of bacteria. And that just destroys your microbial ecosystem that's keeping you healthy. And it's just like man, I kicked 3 rounds of antibiotics. Shit, like
I was fucked.
A doctor tried to prescribe me antibiotics the other day for something that I totally didn't need it for, and I just refused to take them. I was just like, fuck that shit. Like, it happens because doctors are trying to be safe medically, but being safe medically for possible infection means you're harming the patient in a completely other way. And unless, to me, it's life-threatening, like, I won't take antibiotics anymore.
Yeah, I had MRSA, so I had to take the antibiotics because I was most certainly going to die if I didn't take the antibiotics. It was kind of scary. But I did learn a lot from it, so it was kind of a blessing and a curse. Now, do you place probiotics in the biohacking, or is it kind of like a G-rated movie and you don't like? Nah, come on. It's like, it's a movie, but it's for kids. No,
totally. But so like a lot of the probiotics that you can take at the store can totally help your gut health and stuff like that. To me, though, like biohacking would be something like trying to find new probiotics or taking probiotics and measuring how they actually affect you, how they change the composition of your gut bacteria or something like that. I think with a lot of medicine and these like in-between technologies that we don't understand a lot about, there's a total lack of information, right? So there are studies that show probiotics can help, but like how and who and how much they help, there's never been these huge, massive studies that are needed to determine, what is actually good.
Yeah, and the government has a weird stance on placing regulation. There's regulation in place, and they're so wonky about it, and it just kind of seems like they notice it, and then they shut it down, then try and understand it, and then they kind of fuck it up for the rest of them. Because there's people doing exciting shit like you. How do we fix this?
So the U.S. government, despite their many faults, are probably one of the most open governments in the world to genetic engineering and stuff like that.
Who's number one? Germany?
No, the U.S. is the best.
Really? Wow, okay.
Worst? Yeah, no, Germany is probably one of the worst.
Oh, wow, okay. They're focused on cars. That's all they're doing. They're just making BMWs. That's all they're doing.
Actually, so I once gave an art show in Germany. I was working with a couple artists, and we actually wanted to expose the public to some genetic engineering. So we got these genetically modified fish that fluoresce. They like glow. Well, in order to get them in the museum and display them on public, like we had to go through so much paper. We had to build a structure in the middle of the museum that could be certified as like a laboratory, and then there had to be people who oversaw this. It was just insane. And you're like, what's going to happen? Like, are these fish going to jump out and like go run away and infect other fish? Like, what is going on? Germany's brutal when it comes to probably China and the U.S. are big supporters and advocates of genetic engineering, despite all the regulation. as big advocates as there are in the world.
Oh, that's interesting to hear the U.S. is the most advanced or the most liberal.
Yeah, I know it really is, but I think especially, I'm not saying I'm for the current administration or anything like that, but what they're saying is that they want to reduce regulations on small businesses, and people are trying to innovate even more. So I have no idea what's going to happen. It could be very beneficial for everybody in terms of like CRISPR and other things.
Huh, that's interesting. So U.S. has a lot of regulations out there. We place you in charge. They hear this podcast, the Cybrink podcast, and then they think, oh, wow, this guy really knows his shit. And because that's how the government officials talk, they swear. And they say, all right, we're going to place him in charge. And they say, okay, Josiah Zayner, you are now in charge of policy and regulation for biotech, all CRISPR, and all biohacking. That umbrella, because people in governments are dumb as shit, so they're just like, all that biotech shit, son, you're in charge of the policy. Go ahead and do whatever you need in order to help America. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a tough position, because I don't know if that's like a position anybody would want me to be in, because I guess I'm more libertarian in views, and I think people should, when it comes to things like biohacking and biotech that aren't inherently dangerous, they should have the ability to do whatever they want and explore whatever they want. And I don't think a lot of people would agree with that. And it might not even be the best choice. I don't really know, but that's kind of the point of view I come from, is that there's so many creative and brilliant people out there, right? So if you were to ask people now or even 20 years ago and say, hey, where do you think the most popular operating system in the world would come from? They might say, oh, like Harvard or Stanford or Microsoft or Apple, when in fact the most widely used operating system, Linux, which is Android, which is, so many major operating systems come from, the most widely used operating system in the world, came from a student in Finland, came from a master's student, Linus Torvalds, working out of his apartment. And you think, shit, brilliant creative people, when they have access to technology, can create amazing things. So all we need to really do is give them access to technology. And maybe that's not the best decision or best answer, but I kind of believe that.
Well, it's open source, right? I mean, that's kind of the future. I think that's where Bill Gates is kind of at, is just, no, it's Elon Musk. He's all about open source and putting that shit out there for other people to build on.
Totally. Yeah, because it's like, hey, it's not just about making money. That's part of it. But like, you make a product that people can use, but you also make a product that people can innovate off of, because we're not only just trying to create a future for, or like a consumer market right now, we're trying to create a future for everybody, right? A better future for us all. And especially when it comes to CRISPR and shit like that, like, what the fuck? We're talking about possibly the greatest medicine of our lifetimes, and maybe of the next, 10, 20, 30 years. And the fact that there's like patent battles on it, and that people can't really use it, or they're restricted on what they can use it for, like, to me, that's ridiculous. How many lives could be possibly saved, or just what innovations can happen? Like, why aren't we trying to use this more?
It's that corporate greed, basically. They think, oh, wow, this is great. We got to make money on it, when really it's a bacteria that should be making some money on it, because it's their.
I know, right? Totally.
Like, the bacteria would be like the richest dude driving a Bentley, just being a baller. Is at the strip club being like, yeah, CRISPR-Cas9. I fucking created that shit, man. That's what's up.
Because it's like a discovery, right?
Well, like, how long do you think it's just been there around? Like, how long has that CRISPR technology been around? Just since the advent, since a bacteria started?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's probably been around, millions or billions of years.
That's crazy to think about, right? One of the oldest technologies out in the world has resurfaced, and now we can put wings on pigs, literally. Which begs a question: how the fuck do you put a wing on a pig with CRISPR? Or how give me an example of how you can use CRISPR that will make sense for my idiot primate brain.
No, so like putting wings on a pig might be a little too far right now because we don't understand. We've never been able to experiment with technology like this, before much. But you can imagine that, right? If you understand the development and how wings form on another animal, theoretically, you should be able to take those genes, figure out how they work in an organism like a pig, put them in there, and allow them to create wings. Whether the wings would actually work and a pig is just too fat to fly is unknown, but it should be theoretically possible to completely do this stuff.
Huh. So let's take something like ALS as an example. Can we use CRISPR hypothetically to eliminate or eradicate ALS?
So what is ALS genetic? I don't know if it's actually a genetic disease. Oh
okay.
yeah.
Maybe Parkinson's. Is there a genetic disease that you know of that we can use for this example?
So one big one right now is, for instance, like Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is caused by a genetic repeat in one or multiple genes in a human. They've actually done experiments in mice where they use CRISPR and they destroy the bad gene. Really, it's actually pretty simple when it comes to CRISPR, in terms of CRISPR, because CRISPR can get really complicated with inserting genes and things like that. I don't know how many people exactly have Huntington's disease or been diagnosed with it, but it's like a horrible disease. It destroys like the autonomous nervous function, and where people can't like walk or move. So you can imagine that, like, even if this is extremely experimental, why aren't we trying to use it on people? Or why isn't this being tested? Like, what's holding people back is the big question. Is it regulation? Is it fear of somebody getting hurt or injured? Or, like, what's holding us back?
What is holding us back? What's because I'm all for it. What's the speed bump here?
I think a lot of it's regulation and fear, right? People are afraid that something's going to go wrong, and they're afraid of regulation, and also I'm sure money plays into it a little bit, but it's a combination of things, but none of it's like stoked by, hey, we want to fucking help people, and that's what it should be. It's like, what the shit? We've seen how this works, and it shouldn't be too complicated. What is holding us back from testing this out? Even if it doesn't help somebody with Huntington's disease, their other choice is to, not have a good life and not live a full life. And to me, that's worse, and probably for some of these people, a worse, outcome than being injured or hurt or something.
Now, with CRISPR, one of the big things that just freak people out is that you can truly change someone at a genetic level. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, you could actually modify their genome, the genome in their body.
So hypothetically, or actually, you can correct me if it's not hypothetical, but someone could change their genome to eliminate. Let's say they sequence their DNA. They find out that they carry. Oh man, I am so not smart enough to say this. Carry the genome, or do they carry something? The gene. Thank you. God damn, I'm a fucking idiot. But that's why I love this podcast. I'm gonna learn so much. But they carry the gene for Huntington's, but it's not expressed, right? And then if they have a kid, there's a possibility for that gene to be expressed for Huntington's disease to manifest in their child, the offspring. So
totally.
Hypothetically, you could take CRISPR, you can eradicate that gene, you can abolish it, you can go in and CRISPR will cut it out, and then it'll get replaced. And then if we do that with enough people, hypothetically, we could end Huntington's disease or even prevent it. Because sequencing the DNA is cheaper now than it ever was before. And hypothetically, you could kind of even say, well, all right, I want a kid with blue eyes. I want a kid who's 6'4", who's built like a linebacker, or possibly even pick gender.
We definitely can create children using a technology with CRISPR with different characteristics that we want. It's not as precise as you'd want it to be because we don't know enough information about all the genetic causes of certain characteristics, but like you can do general things. But I think the point is that we already do things just on a more primitive level. So essentially, if you're choosing a mate to procreate with, you're choosing the characteristics that you want in your children. People seem to think it's better somehow because it's like natural or something. But really, like, why is this primitive, like, I don't know exactly what's going on, better than somebody actually understanding what's going on and trying to make changes, right? To me, being able to make those changes with the technical knowledge is a lot more reasonable. But I really haven't found an argument that's good against why people shouldn't be able to, modify their children.
No, and that's a great lead-in because at the-odin.com, you can get a genetic engineering home lab kit for $945 or a CRISPR kit for freaking $150. How crazy is that? You can buy a CRISPR kit for $150. What is your aim in getting those kits out there to people?
I mean, it just comes down to genetic literacy, right? We're talking about all this crazy shit that people think is sci-fi and all this stuff, but it's really not. And the only thing stopping people from utilizing this technology is just the genetic literacy, being literate about the technology. So the main goal is, how can I get this in the hands of people at a price they can afford so that they can become literate, so that they can create cool shit? Because, fuck, man, like, I want to live in a world where all this cool stuff is going on. I think we all do, but that requires a ton of people working on it. It doesn't require just PhD scientists who are doing boring ass shit like I did during my PhD, studying thermodynamics of proteins, which, I mean, sounds fucking crazy and interesting, but really when it comes down to it, nobody gives a shit. And studying things like, how do we fucking put wings on pigs? Or how do we make a dragon? Like, shit, man, I want a motherfucking dragon.
No, I'm going to beat you to it first, bitch. How about that? No, just kidding. You're way smarter than I am. It'd probably take me 100 years. But let's take me for an example. If I buy like a CRISPR kit at home, what can I do with it? When I open it up, what's your hope for me to do that? And someone that has no science background whatsoever, and this is a hilarious part of this, is that I went to a Christian high school, and I'm getting better now, scientifically.
Hey man, also yeah. I grew up in the church also,
Did
right?
You? And fuck yeah, buddy! Woo!
I was one of those, I was a PK for a while, and I grew up in one of those things where, man, I knew how to like say everything against evolution and all this stuff, but I didn't understand it at all. That was the problem.
God, you would fuck yourself up if you debated yourself back then.
I know I would. I would seriously destroy myself because I just didn't understand it. And I think the problem is this literacy is the big issue, is just helping people be literate. But yeah, no, like the kits that we provide, so our CRISPR kits, they come with example experiments. The number one goal with the CRISPR kit, right? I understand that most people don't have the time and effort to like study CRISPR and study genes and genetics and understand how all this stuff works. But the CRISPR kit comes with an example experiment that somebody can do on bacteria provided with the kit to edit the genome of the bacteria and just figure out how it all works. Because I think that's the first step, right? That's the first step, is just getting the technology in front of people, having people figure out how it works. And with the kit, if somebody wanted to do advanced experiments and learn how to do CRISPR for something else, like just as we talked about, the possibilities are kind of just out there, right? They have to come up with, their imagination and understand the genes that do the process, but the possibilities are there.
Well, also, I get a feeling that if I got a CRISPR kit, that I'd start playing with it. I would get obsessed with it, because this is like you're literally editing yourself, or you can.
Yeah, no. With CRISPR technology, you really can, right? Like, it's a lot more complicated than that, obviously. when you're trying to do stuff on yourself and get the DNA into your body, that requires a little more knowledge, but all these things are totally possible, right? It's totally possible. And I hope people understand that there is no like education level or anything like that. Just like Linus Torvalds created the operating system that's used by the majority of the world, like you can be that person. There's nothing stopping you except maybe religion, like us.
God damn. We broke free. Well, the only thing is that you probably got a thirst for knowledge, like for science, and you couldn't stop because it just got so interesting for you. And I get the sense that this is exactly what you're trying to do to people, is just get people excited about science. Because, man, once that veil came over my eyes and I realized that the Earth isn't 10,000 years old, I fucking had a meltdown. Like, I was just like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? What about that giant belt they told me about? You know?
Totally. And then you start to see like all these things that, people think that you thought were like bad or wrong are actually cool and amazing. You're just like, holy shit, like evolution isn't this bad thing. It's just that like genes over time change. And when genes change over time, that can give organisms new abilities. And like through this complex cycle of billions of years, like things can change enough to create something new. And you're just like, whoa, mind blown that like, if I can do that myself, I can take an organism, right, and modify the genes and have it develop new functions. Obviously, I don't have billions of years, so it's difficult for me to make anything too complex, but people are working on that. People are actually working on making things through evolution. There's a scientific process called directed evolution to try to speed it up, where you like try to direct the evolution of the organism to give it a specific function or to gain some new function. And it's mind-blowing.
And the crazy thing too is that it's just the very fucking beginning. It's not like we're like it's I mean, think about it this way. We've gone so far in 200 years, and CRISPR is just barely started. Like you talked about it, like in 2012. It's been around a long time, but they're starting to figure it out. So it kind of has a weird timeline in and of itself.
Let me say this, dude, David, is totally true. And it's like this, dude, like this is the first time in human history, right? Ever since before this, we've been slaves to our genes, right? The genes we had from birth, we had, and there was nothing we could do about it for all of human history. This is the first time when that's not true anymore. When you no longer have to be stuck with the genes you had from birth. And when you start to think about it like that, it's just like mind blown. Like what is going to happen? What can we do? What are we going to do?
We're going to get rid of idiots first. How about that? How about we start there? We bring back the saber-toothed tiger, you know?
That's a good one. I like that.
We CRISPR that shit, and then we put one saber-toothed tiger per 10,000 people. We make life a little bit more difficult for everyone. So you just...
Wait. I also want the dragons. Like, we need to figure out how to get dragons in here somehow.
Well, the problem is how they're going to start the flame. Because you can get a lizard, and if you look at a chicken and you just take out the feathers... I just went from lizards to chickens, but follow me here. If you take a chicken, take out the feathers, they're basically a fucking dinosaur.
Yeah.
They're carnivores, right? So make a chicken bigger and then CRISPR a flamethrower on that thing. I haven't figured, I'm not smart enough for it, but let's do that. Let's have dragons and let's have saber-toothed tigers. Let's make life a little bit more difficult. Let's thin the herd.
And you know what the problem is? You know how many scientists in the world right now are working on even just understanding the genetics of what it would take to make a dragon? 0. That's a problem to me. That's a big problem. So that's why we need people to get involved, right? That's why democratizing this technology, getting people genetically illiterate, because no, the U.S. government's not going to, give a grant to somebody to explore the possibility of making a dragon.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Everyone needs to know how to organize their life. You still have to find out what works for you and your body and your genes.
Yeah, well, I think also they're just not being exposed to it, right? Nobody's telling them that this stuff is possible. It's hard to get that in front of people. And I think that's both of our, like, with your podcast and with this show and with my company, it's like, how do I get this in front of the most eyes and ears? So
we're going
that
to put you on Shark Tank. That's what we're going to do. You're going to go on Shark Tank. You're going to wear a lab coat. You're going to have a hot assistant. And you're going to tell this rich fat guy that he's going to have this gene and that is going to turn him skinny and he can eat cheeseburgers and no longer have heart disease. You don't need stints anymore, buddy. You can just eat whatever the fuck you want and boners for life because we're going to change that shit too. Because it's all possible. I mean, I joke around about it.
All the old white guys will be on top of that. That's all you have to say is boners for life. All the old white guys will be on top of that.
Oh, the moment someone CRISPRs some sort of gene that'll give you a boner whenever you want to think about it, that's when we start making billionaires from CRISPR.
I know. How is it like Viagra? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I see commercials for them all the time.
Yeah, but you can do that, right? That's the thing you can do with CRISPR. You can change someone's genes for something like that. Not boners. I'm not talking about boners, but you could do better quality of life for people. And that's the most exciting thing. I think that's where it's got to start. There's so much creativity around CRISPR that you can do with this $150 kit that you can get at the-odin.com. What is something that you'd like to see that isn't really being explored?
I think what we're really trying to explore and what we hope other people explore is making stuff that's like, I don't want to say useful, but useful. Like a lot of science experiments, including with CRISPR, are to study illnesses and diseases and genes and things like that. But like on our website, how we sell engineering kits for modifying yeast, like brewing and baking yeast, I want people to start to be able to explore what they do in their everyday life with genetic modification, how to modify plants in their garden, how to modify the yeast they use for baking, how to modify the bacteria that they eat in their yogurt or use for their kombucha or whatever, stuff like that. I think it needs to start entering into people's lives, everyday lives, so that it can start being a technology that's accepted and a technology that is less regulated in the long term.
There are renegades, just because I'm a Rage Against the Machine fan, but there are people that they disrupt society or they go against the grain or they do something that's not so popular for the betterment of the world, and people don't realize it when it's happening, but when it's viewed through a historical lens, it's something so momentous and so brave that it's just it deserves an applause. It deserves recognition. I think you're under that umbrella of that for biohacking and CRISPR. Having some, I had no idea you could get an at-home CRISPR kit or a genetic engineering home lab kit for under $1,000 That's crazy. You know?
Yeah, man.
I think you're one of those people. I think you're a renegade. I think I applaud you for what you're doing. You're such a fucking cool guy. And we kind of have the similar background, and I'm so excited to see what the fuck you have coming up your sleeve, and not even that, but you're the catalyst for something that could just fucking change the world. By some fucking 8-year-old kid thinks, oh, I'm gonna CRISPR butter, and then all of a sudden it turns into this awesome. I don't know why I said butter, but they CRISPR something, and you're the catalyst for a huge change that betters humanity or sapiens. That's exciting.
I think that the people out there using this technology are going to be able to do crazy and amazing things. And the one thing I think is that I could never do the work of even, a couple, 2 or 3 humans. So I think it's hugely important that people start picking up this technology and using it themselves, because there's already starting to be a little bit of a backlash of people being afraid of the technology, not for even reasonable reasons, just because they don't understand it. And by people creating stuff that helps humanity, I think it'll really push through, and the regulations will fall by the wayside, and people will be able to do some amazing shit.
Well, you're doing some rad shit, and I'm I was a fan when I was just doing some research and reading what you're doing, and I'm even bigger fan now. And anything I can do to help, and anything that anyone that's listening can do to help, would be just appreciated, because this is we're, like you said, this is the first time now that we're not slaves to our biology, to our genes. And that's so exciting, especially if you think about people that their quality of their life will be increased. So if someone wants to reach out, help out, or just do something to help, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so they can email me at case, C-A-S-E, at the-Odin, as in our All-Father, Odin.com. Or you can find me on Twitter. It's the number 4, L-O-V, of science, so for love of science. I'm sure if you just search me on the internet, Josiah Zayner, you'll find some way to contact me. I'm pretty open to contact on Facebook or any other thing.
All right. Anything exciting that you're working on that you want to tease that people can go back and check at the-Odin or josiahzayner.com?
Totally. I mean, one of the major things I'm working on is, making human genetic engineering accessible. And I think we've got some really exciting results that I will be posting soon about how easy it is to actually genetically engineer yourself with DNA from other organisms, which is just insane.
Thanks again, man. I honestly do appreciate it. Go check them out, the-Odin.com, josiahzayner.com, or if you don't know now, ya, Y-A, no.com.